Welcome, everyone, to the Umana Yana Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Tripal, and today I have a very dear friend joining us for a very intentional conversation. And without further ado, I'm going to flip it on over to her, and she's going to introduce herself, and then we're going to jump right on in. Over to you, my friend.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeannette Eastin. I am so honored to be here with Josh. I've known him and his lovely wife, Suki, for so long. And this is such a great platform to start the new year off and discussing about education. And Refound Education is trying to do just that. We are an education hub and marketplace, and we are trying to flip the script on education and put the front line in the driver's seat so that we can really create positive change for our kids.
Amazing. And, Jeanette, thank you so much for your work. I remember the first event that we came to for Refound Education. I remember walking in there and feeling the power of the event. It was really, really special. And I see everything you continue to do in the name of education, in the name of childhood, in the name of children, and in the name of the future. So, I think that everything that you have been doing, much of these things being behind the scenes that people might not even know about. I see how you're really helping to lay the groundwork for wonderful things to emerge. And that's not just in Canada. I know you are based in Ontario right now, but this is on a global scale. The impact that you've been able to have on so many ecosystems who might not have even met you personally yet. It's absolutely tremendous. And I think that your background makes you so unique in how you show up as well. You are very much holistic, I feel, from the roles that you've occupied so far, from the different people that you really make an intention to connect with and understand more because you understand how they also impact the ecosystem. I see you really approach it with a different level of intention and clarity, and with a very clear, although often maybe misunderstood, destination in mind. So thank you for that.
Thank you for saying that. So kind.
You're welcome. So, we do have an action-packed episode, and for those who are tuning in, this is going to be stuff that I think applies um, to anybody. I think anyone is going to be able to see themselves in this conversation and probably feel called to action in some way, shape, or form. Whether you are a parent, maybe you're an educator, maybe you're a hopeful for either of those things. I think that this is very relevant. And I think that it's always a relevant conversation when we're talking about the education of the children who are the ones who we're passing the torch to carry forward, for everyone else next. And looking at this in a very honest way, I think is the best way that we can be in service to our audience. So without further ado, I want us to jump in and, be honest. All right. So, you know, the first question I want to start us off with is, if you were to have a totally clear canvas on the education system, right? You had no legacy system to protect, no one's pockets that, have been lined. So you need to follow through on what it is that they want. What would education actually look like today if you were the one who was, curating this thing, right? And what parts would you keep from what people might be seeing in Canada right now? And what parts would you totally do away with?
That's a great question. So we're kind of on our way, well on our way, having our MVP, so which is a minimum viable product for people who don't understand. So things that we kept were insurance perks, health benefits, because leaving some of those legacy systems, those were some of the pain points people were experiencing, especially because they had some health fallout due to our current system. So it was something that was being asked for. And insurance is a big thing because it can get pricey when operational expenses are very expensive when you're helping out children. And those things needed to be addressed. And happily, we were able to do that with the help of so many incredible people, including Josh was part of that equation. And from that jumping point, it was just coming together. So a small business network is essentially what we are. And vendors and educators sign up, and they use it as a marketplace and a directory so parents can connect. And we're going to be taking that a few steps further by getting people to interconnect. Hubs are the future. Small business networks are the future. We're talking about flipping the hierarchy. And yes, it will be a little bit of a gig economy, but that is the direction of the world right now. And people want options. And life as we have known it to be isn't actually what it is.
Mm,
Um, People are kind of looking at the lives that they want, and they're designing backwards, and they want flexible learning environments, and teachers are willing to provide it. We just have to flip the hierarchy, which is not a popular perspective,
yeah.
and invest the majority of the finances into the front line and the children. If the money goes primarily there, we will have more educators in place with our kids, because and with their families, which is very important. Our world is made up of very institutions in themselves, especially the smaller ones, are not really the big problem. It's the larger monopolies that have really dehumanized a lot of the care that comes with children. And we need to see them from a human perspective. And children are not cattle, educators are not. To be sucked dry. And I know that's a perspective people take on employees, but if we take care of each other, we would actually have create new legacy systems that we can actually be proud of.
Yeah.
And we look forward to creating business structures that will support and sustain so that everybody has an opportunity to thrive in this crazy, chaotic world we have.
Yeah, I hear that. And something really interesting that I've found when it comes to the education space, right? And whenever it comes to the idea of change and shift and whatnot, you know, a lot of people often they're very quick to reference how well paid teachers in Canada are. Right now, I don't know the exact numbers. Maybe you can correct me here, but after a certain point, I've been told that they kind of hit that six-figure mark, right? And with teachers, depending on what level they're at and whatnot, they're going to get their summers off. They're going to get relatively, relatively juicy benefits, say from their healthcare and things like that, right? And what I find that often does is it kind of removes any element of compassion towards any burnout that these teachers might feel. And to whenever there's any sort of effort to change how things are going, I feel like there's almost this push pull thing because it's like the teachers want to protect, oh, well, we're well paid and we're this and we're that. But at the same time, we need to do things a little differently. Right. So I see that as often one of the things that we need to create a proper resolution around. Right. Because if we're on one side not having compassion towards these folks who are at the front line of educating and doing all of these things, well, then they're going to burn out at some point. And then the ones who, maybe have gone into the field from a place of purpose and wanting to really influence the young minds versus just this being a paycheck and some time off. Right. Those people are going to be cycled through. Right. And then we're just going to end up with folks who maybe that's not their guiding principle.
Yes, absolutely. And it's the big problem right now is so you start around 55,000, you pay out of pocket for everything. So once you chisel down from the back end, your take home is not what people often think it is. After a decade, yes, in Canada you can make six figures, but it's also at what cost and what is your health worth. There's a lot of principles that are being are policies that are being trickled down to the front line that are just not sustainable. And there's a lot of behaviors that are beyond the parameters of mainstream education. And you can't, people will call it inclusion, but it's sink or swim. And you can't put extreme behaviors without foundational skills into these classrooms where the numbers are anywhere between 20, 30. I remember one time they tried to give me 36. I was like, "Oh,"
Wow.
they're like, "Oh, but you're so great." I'm like, "Bite me." You know? Like, no, no.
Yeah.
it's just a way for them to try and take advantage, and it's not acceptable. And the alternative education space, even though educators are starting off with less financially, they also have better mental health outcomes because they have smaller groups. The sweet spot seems to be around like 8 to 15 kids, depending on the needs of the kids. And so it's really starting to and they can pour more into them. That means that they can actually turn their behaviors around. They can become more self-sufficient and independent, which means that they can really just start getting really creative, which is what the future calls
Yeah.
for in this uncertain time, because the industrial age is done.
Mm.
And the future is asking for creativity, problem solving, communication skills. And we are just like, AI might be a tool, but there is a term that's come out. It's called AI slop.
Okay.
And that term is in reference to, it's lost that human touch, if you will. And so people are getting bored with it. And you can't, um, they need that personal touch. Like, you cannot replace educators the way people think that you can. And these young generation, these teachers are coming into the profession and they are not staying. I had a friend's cousin who stayed for 3 months, and she was offered an education job remotely, and she left faster than you could blink. So, because it's changing so frequently and they're realizing, they're not really in it for us. I do think the next generation's actually better about setting boundaries, and that's not a terrible thing, even if one generation harps on another.
Yeah.
That will always happen. But there does need to be limitations in terms of what people inside of these legacy systems are expected to endure, and the amount of finances. And the parents are also, there's a lot of good cop, bad cops. So a lot of like educators are blaming the parents are blaming educators, but it's a lot of the way that our world is structured is not conducive for growth on both sides. Parents are, if you think about their schedule, it's morning, go, 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 get your shoes on, this and that, get them out the
Mhm.
door.
Yeah.
And then you come home and it's go, go, go. I got to make dinner. I got to do, all the things. And so their ability to spend quality time, which is where growth happens, is really challenging. And it's challenging on the flip side for educators, and not sustainable to have these um, work environments. So health will continue to deteriorate in their mental health. And what's the price tag that comes with that? I do think educators should be paid very well. And 70% is a feminine, which is not to discount, the roles that the feminine and masculine bring to the table, but it would also be really great to get industry specific professionals who, they have their families to support, or they have certain expectations, and a higher talent, better talent pools will want more. They will not work for free unless they are structured to do so. We do have some people that, have their charities and can, extend themselves in some way, but we would like it to be, um, have reciprocity in our communities. And right now, the money is sitting at the top and it's not going around evenly. And I think we can change the game and improve our economic standards, the standards of educating our kids, the way we live. Um, but I think the future is going to ask that we all be very uncomfortable on how we move forward
Yeah.
and adapt and change very readily.
So, I mean, as someone who has a lot of the inside track that maybe the average bear wouldn't, right? What can you share to perhaps enlighten a lot of our audience around maybe some of the trickle? You mentioned that there's some trickle down that's going on, right, from the top and whatnot. A lot of parents, they might be too busy, or they might not have thought to investigate this. They might not even be able to necessarily access this, right? So, can you shed some light on that, just so maybe our audience can have a better understanding of what they're actually coming up against? Maybe some of the lesser known things that people might not know about what they're dealing with when it comes to this system that's still currently in place.
So a learning class is starting to emerge. So the system is always designed the cans versus the cannots, the coming from humble beginnings. I like to think that everybody should have, access to opportunities, and it would be nice to see actual inclusion, or real inclusion, and equitable access to different opportunities. And the learning class is starting to emerge. So you have public school can't sustain the skill, or can't teach the skills to our children to be able to sustain and have a different quality of life. They're stuck in the past, and the future requires other skill sets. And so the learning class is emerging. The parents that are willing to sacrifice, the parents that are seeing what's happening. And we've had families that have all moved in together, multiple generations, to be able to give their children more.
Mm,
If your child is in the system, if you don't get tutoring, if you don't get something extra, they will fall behind. And it's these ugly realities that we do have to face. Our literacy rates are abysmal. Um, I know it's controversial, but we are going towards privatization. It does not have to be a bad thing
mhm,
if we invest in our neighbors and our communities and our local business owners who are pouring their heart and soul into what they're building and are committed to the children within those communities. So and we can improve and actually level the playing field for everybody. So we can reduce that learning class and make it accessible to more children so that they are readers and they love it and they
mm,
do understand principles of math and finance. That whole financial education. It's a big, I know it's a big topic right now, and it is a very serious topic. There's a lack of understanding, but it's a systemic one, and done with intent. And so I think we can really destroy some of these barriers if we can just understand. They are going to amalgamate. Alternative is starting to prove that it is what we claim it to be. And smaller groups, you can give them the attention and the love that they deserve. So of course there's going to be growth. Of course there's going to be, improved literacy and math rates. And our traditional systems, they are going to start to amalgamate. One example is in Ontario, we have 72 school boards in one province and 10 school authorities. And we pay for the infrastructure of all of it. And the numbers, and a lot of the parents, especially new parents, are not throwing their kids into kindergarten as quickly. They are not, or they're choosing alternative means, like you go to school 3 days a week, you do nature school twice a week. The rules around how you do education are going out the window. You can do 6 months a cruise, and your child can go learn what it's like to be on a ship for 6 months in high school. I know there's a teenage program for that. You can go on homeschooling cruises. You can go on, like, there are no limits to how we learn. There are homesteads that are creating these there are homesteads that are creating these just holistic environments, and not everybody can have the animals and the chickens. They require lots of care. And I love the farm environments that um, actually bring in farm schools. It's really amazing, and they're starting to open their space to other schools so that they can all have these shared experiences, even if it's the short term, long term, whatever people can afford. But alternative education is flexible, and I do encourage parents to start exploring your options. You can go to a farm school once a week if means are, an issue. And you can just start to engage in that way and introduce more nature. And you do have that flexibility, more flexibility than you would actually, than has been known to have historically. So, yeah, we're growing, and it's going to be very interesting to see where the chips fall.
yeah. No, thank you for that. And you said something that I'm sure some of our listeners are probably like, "Oh my gosh, did she say that?" And so I want to ask you, you when you mentioned privatization of education, right? You said it's not necessarily a bad thing. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that because in all the conversations that I've been a part of so far, right? When that word comes up, it's usually like doom and gloom. Oh my goodness, definitely no, all those kind of sentiments, right? So I'm curious from you, why or sorry, what are some of the things that perhaps people can look toward privatization as maybe possibly having some upsides as well?
So we've been working on it's very controversial. Um, I think it would, in an ideal world, um, I think families should have education funds and use it to vote essentially for their programs of choice, and then we'll naturally see the best of the best start to rise, and the ones that the community desires most, which would actually be in our children's favor. And we can start tailoring programs to the needs of the community. Like before, it's always been like a top down dictatorship.
Okay.
Whereas maybe we need to address the needs of the community, see what the community needs. And yes, there's kind of certain principles that we should push, even if maybe that's not their principal desire, like financial literacy in itself. But essentially, we need those pivotal skills and then address all the community's desires. Because some communities do have like a lot of special needs kids, and those needs are being addressed at all. And it's actually really sad. We have a 1 in 4 kids has is neurospicy, and they are wait lists for support are abysmal. And we're talking about tens of thousands of millions of kids across Canada who are not getting the support around their needs, and parents that are not getting that village that people talk about. But when you have a special needs child, you don't even have time to invest in a village to feel that sense of reciprocity, and it's very depleting. And we if we can actually give the money to the parents, they can employ their own supports, and we can help connect them with people that want to help, because a lot of our alternative education say they would be willing to be more adaptable if they were given supports. And so that's something we're looking at. Of course, if the government gives, they will expect. Um, so in the US, I know they've already done it, and they expect the children to write a test to, um, show that, I guess, some kind of growth. And you do have to be conscientious that there isn't that element of, control and the certain expectations. It can get a little messy. But if we come together as a collective, we can also support each other in the direction that we want to go. And right now we have no voice in the public systems at all, and private systems. Parents have a voice because they pay for it. So if we can have just find ways to come together and fill these voids, we can move the needle faster, because that's part of the deterioration of mental health is the lack of supports that these people have. And it won't continue. We have some potential new projects I'm not going to speak of quite yet, but I'm excited to, and I'm so lucky to have so many people in our village that want to help and contribute in so many ways. And there are business structures we can employ to ensure that, um, yeah, things can happen and move forward.
Okay. Well, that's wonderful to know, and really look forward to supporting you in all of those. To ground some of this in a bit more reality for our audience, when you refer to, say, wait times for these kids to access the services and testing and things that they need, right, through the current model, when you say abysmal, what's an abysmal wait time? Just so that people are very clear about what the wait times are actually in reality versus just sort of picking a number out of a hat.
It was like around 3 to 5 years before. Now it's like 5 to 8 years. So you have the potential of aging out some of these kids by the time they actually would get access to it. Um, We do have some educators that can help parents who are looking to navigate what resources they can access. So please contact us if you need any help with that. We know some incredible people that are making strides. But 5 to 8 years, I'm a mother of a son with autism. And once I learned about the bureaucracy within, I was appalled about, and I'm lucky because this is my peanut butter jelly, that is my jam, my kids are not, um, are doing so well, and I'm blessed in that way, but some parents don't have the skill sets, and a lot of educators are not trained in mental health. They do academics, but they're not necessarily having started in mental health because I've done it for over 25 years and then gone into education. It was very interesting because I dealt with the worst. So when I went into education, I was like,
Mm,
okay, this isn't so bad.
got
Um, but people's tolerance to certain behaviors is low because they haven't experienced it and they don't have the training. And equally, the parents don't always have the training and they're just doing the best they can with the information they have. And so you're missing that education piece and that collaborative piece between everyone. And I think we can do better with that because the kids want to be successful. Their parents want their kids to be successful. Even the rascally ones that you think don't care.
yeah.
I've had kids come from very far away to seek me out asking like, "Miss, I need your help." I'm like, "Oh, you don't go here. Let's go talk over there." But it's interesting to see that they do want the support. They want the help if they could have access to it. It's just finding it, and which is what we're bridging right now. And now we want to get as many providers on the site as possible so that we can act together and with parents and start pushing things in our favor.
Okay, well, definitely a worthy thing. I mean, to even imagine a wait list for anything, um, in the years, like, to think about it in years, it just absolutely blows my mind, especially with how prevalent, some of these things that, parents and kids would be seeking support for. Like, it's not like it's a small drop in the bucket. Like, it's a significant portion of the population now who's needing additional help. So I think that what you're building and facilitating and supporting in, I think that's going to be the answer to a lot of prayers, definitely. Because I can't imagine as a parent, like I'm not even a parent right now, and I can't even imagine how frustrating that must be.
And you have some parents with even like medically fragile children, and they want to just, socially contribute, even if, there's challenges. They want to be a part, but they need a nurse to help with the feedings, or they need very specialized type care. And they deserve it. So it'll be really nice to challenge some of those perspectives. And even educators who might be nervous, don't be nervous. You are in demand. You are needed more than you might be led to believe. And the opportunities are there if we can push for them. And we have more than enough kids that need our help. 1 in 4 is very, very substantial.
Yeah. Wow. That is quite a number. I think something that's a very common thread that runs through everything that we want to talk about today and have talked about so far is the role of the family, right? And so, you know, from your perspective, do you think that like the education system, I don't even want to call it the modern education system because I don't think it's modern. Do you think the education system that I guess, the majority of maybe Canadian kids are going through right now, like, do you think that that was ever designed with the families in mind, right? Or is it really just the byproduct of we need something that's going to create a structure that supports our economic productivity?
It's yes, that very much. And it's yeah, locking children in a room with fluorescent lights for a period of time. It's very, for lack of a better word, prison-esque. And that's not how we should be functioning as a collective and as a family. People want to spend time with their families. I enjoy spending time with my children. But I also very much wanted to be a mother. So, and I know some people are just finding they're tired to parent because they're overexhausted. And I think we need to change how we do business, how we interact with each other, a lot of our existing business models. And education is no different than like healthcare. Our healthcare models need to change as well. And there are a lot of business structures. When people call things free, nothing is free. These are business structures that feed into other business structures, and we need to understand that moving forward, we have to put our families at the center. That's how our society will thrive, and that's how we will bring humanity back. And we need to bring humanity back because at this point, I think it's fair to say that we're a bit lost and we need to push to be central in our kids' lives. And I don't care who says what. The parents are the keepers of their children. Yes, it is very important that they have that pivotal role. And if they're given flexibility at work, they can be more present with their children. And if they have flexibility at school, it's one of those things where we're starting to create flexible learning environments,
Right.
but now some of the work environments are not keeping up.
Okay. Gotcha.
Some of them, in fact, are backpedaling.
I see that. Yeah.
It's interesting. Some of these corporate, I know a lot of corporate people, and before they were maybe going in twice a week, maybe once a week, and now it's 4 times a week, 5 times a week. It's really interesting how that's developed, and people have tested different models and accountability structures. And it would be nice to actually just improve the flexibility and also the inflation and with all of, so many factors. But if we just start focusing on what matters most, I think we can really start like start designing backwards. And when you think about your children's future, think about the end result and think about what it will take to get them to that end result.
Yeah.
Think of everything that you're missing from your life. What kind of life do you want? And then work backwards. Start challenging your system. Start challenging, like come together with other people. And yes, it's important, the accountability piece with your work environment, and everyone needs to do what they need to do so that you can move forward and function as a company. I understand that part for sure. However, there could be more discussions about, if these accountability points are met, can we be more flexible so we can be more present with our children?
Right. Yeah, and I see that the disconnect with the education and parents seeing that it's not necessarily prepping their kids for modern life, if you will. I see that it does definitely lead to different tension and different things that emerge within the family unit, right? Like, I mean, you have the families who are then gonna take on extra jobs or work late and this and that just to try and okay, I need to get them into a private education bit, right? And then now mom and dad are extra tired and now the marriage disintegrates and now the family falls apart and now everyone needs some therapy and now we're just going to have to work harder to cover those bills. And, like there's a big snowball that happens, right? When we don't actually give the people what they need. And I feel like, the stuff that I was having this conversation a bit earlier today, the stuff that we learned growing up in school, it's like, has it changed much at all? Probably not. Right? Like, and it's not like the world has changed so much, even like in like a 5-year period, that this education should, in its own way, almost be like incomprehensible to us, right? Like who went through the system before, because it should be that different because the world is so different, but it's not, right? So it's very interesting to see. Like when I read some of these things, I almost like the directions that things want to go with education. Like I almost feel like I'm being shown like AI clickbait because I'm like, there's no way that we're doing that now. Like that's how I feel seeing a lot of this content. To be very honest with you.
It is well, yeah. There's probably a lot of clickbait. I'm not going to lie. It is meant to be a distraction, so we as human beings are not as productive, but that will not stop us. But essentially, it does have an impact, however. A lot of young people are feeling like it's hopeless, and they don't have we have to improve the culture and how we function. There are some companies starting to step up. There's an American company, and it was female owned, and they offered to pay for all their employees' childcare. And they even had space where they can have their infant babies there, and then they could bring, they're willing to cover the cost for childcare as well.
Mm,
And I was like, yes, more of that,
yeah.
more of bonding over family. And, you have another fellow parent there with their child. They have the flexibility, they're building bonds. And so that you're creating a culture. And we have to create this culture of more opportunities for happiness and coming together. And even when I did counseling in different schools, the biggest thing, especially some of the worst high schools, worst elementary schools that were really tough, when I was there in the long term, the first thing we did was how to improve morale and culture.
Mm,
And we're aware of this in there's some awareness in corporate. Sometimes they try, sometimes not very well, but
okay.
so sometimes they'll try. But also we have to do that for the kids. Give them reasons to be excited and show up and participate, and find reasons to, find passion. And it's very easy to gather around the water cooler for a little negativity talk.
That's a good point.
But I think we may have to find other reasons to raise our serotonin level that are actually happy and, um, yeah, bring us together in other different ways that make us sustainable as a society.
I hear that, and that's another point that I've been thinking a lot about over the last few years. Just thinking about how when I was in school, what was I looking forward to, right? I was looking forward to graduating, getting my law degree, and going becoming a lawyer, and then buying a house and having family, this and that. And I try and put myself in the shoes of many of the kids today, and it's like, what are you guys looking forward to? And it's like, it's so important for us to be conscientious that these kids, they're looking to all of us to be like, what am I supposed to look forward to in life? Right? Because like a lot of us are kind of just, we're like the walking dead. We just get up and go to work. We come home. We complain that we don't have enough. We go to bed. We start the cycle all over again. So, when hope is lost in that way, that does a lot to every member of the family, right? Even kids who sometimes are dismissed as being too young to be in the know of what's going on. It's like, no, they're far more aware than we give them credit for. Right? And I think that it's so important that we make that be part of the shift when it comes to understanding what needs to happen moving forward. It's like, yes, this is a place to learn and prepare yourself for the future and things like that. But we also need to make sure that there are feelings of joy and purpose attached to it. Cause I feel like a lot of that is missing. And I think that that contributes in some way, shape, or form to the decline in mental health and all the other feelings that we're experiencing, not only within schools, but in society generally.
And they like social connections too. People need to understand, and it's not wrong for them to want to be social like that. Even chickens are social and guinea pigs, and they need that sense of togetherness. So the expectation, children want opportunities to socialize. I used to make up all kinds of random things like basketball club, and I don't know how to play basketball, but the kids would come and just hang out together and play basketball inside if they wanted to avoid the cold, and always gave them reasons to, come in and or just kind of bond together. And or like a culture like a cultural event where they bring different food and dance, and um where they can make fun of my intolerance of spice. um but it's just one of those things where they enjoyed sharing about themselves, learning about each other, and it was sometimes the smallest of acts that actually give them something to look forward to. And I think we need to stop underestimating their ability and their contributions too. Children are smart, they are competent, they have valuable insights on, things we can do. And a lot of the things I did was just listening to the kids, like, what do you guys want to do? And what do you like? And just doing things around their interests and needs. Um, and I think we can do more of those things if we just really started to listen to each other.
Great. Yeah, I think that's so important. And this next question, I've thought a bit about how it impacted me as an adult now. But the question here is, what happens to creativity, autonomy, and identity, right? When children are spending a lot of their time, most of the formative years where they're really setting the foundation for the future of their life, right? They're spending that in systems that are built really hammering home these ideas of like compliance and standardization and external validation, right? I start to think about what impact has that had on me, right? And a lot of that is like to sum it up, it's like I've given my power away in like literally every sense of the word. It's like I only matter if you tell me I matter. And if you don't tell me I matter, I don't matter. Right. And a lot of people, I encourage them, it's like, guys, like, do you not realize that what you're saying with your words is that you want to stand out? But with your action, all you're doing is doing more things to blend in. How does this make any sense? So how have you seen this show up, and what do you think kind of like the future trajectory if we don't disrupt this very intentionally and very swiftly? How do you see this going?
Well, not to be dramatic, but part of their soul will die, and that is not that's not positive. We want, because then they are going to be with our children's children and our, you know, I've spoke to very young children, and they're like, "Oh, you get a paycheck." I'm like, "No, I want to be here. And
Mhm.
if I don't do a good job with you, you're not going to be able to do a good job with my children." And they understood that reciprocity, and I think we need to understand that too. And a lot of our systems aren't built for that. Um, and the future is so with the potential reduction, we'll say, of these systems, colleges and universities also, one third might survive. And I think degree free, they have an account. They kind of go through this very eloquently about like 7.7% of jobs require higher education, right? So a lot of people are investing all this money to come out of university or college with this grand hope that they're going to be so bountiful and just to start their life with six figures of debt. Um, if you are going to take that route, my question is, why don't you start investing in your kids' education at a younger age? Why is it at that age you feel the need to pour all of this when you could have started establishing some of those key skills at a younger age? And you're willing to take out that deficit, and parents are willing to sign on all those loans, but the outcomes are not what people think. And so colleges and universities are going to be reduced significantly. And a lot of jobs have actually um, reduced. Um, it's going to be very interesting. Like, you don't need the degrees that you had before. What you need is receipts. You need proof. You need podcasts. You need you need to show what you're doing and the kind of impact that you had. You need a portfolio. That's what people like need to move forward. You need to, um, which is really tricky because you went from these interesting systems like highly unionized, which we'll have less of, and all these business structures that are going to be so reduced to the point where people are will be afraid. But don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of accountability. Don't be afraid of transparency. Just to try your best to do right by people. You're allowed to make mistakes, and trust that you can actually adopt the skills even if your kids don't want to go to college and university. There are skill sets and certifications that they can acquire that will still make them so competitive in the job market. And I've met like corporate big wigs that had like project management management certifications
Yeah.
and did not have the in my mind I thought, "Oh, you have a master's in business and you have this and that." And they're like, "No, I have a project management certification and I made the money. That's it." I was like, and all they did was started working in their store. You know that start in the mailroom and work your way up
Yeah.
kind of. Um,
Yeah.
so I've seen a lot of people that have actually accomplished far more than some people with paper degrees and diplomas. So,
Yeah.
and we need the creativity, and education systems don't value that. And even in higher education, they don't value creativity. They want you to sit there, be quiet, listen, but the reality is some of these even like people who are working, like teaching you to have a business degree, some of them don't have a successful business. So how is that helpful? It might be more helpful to invest in a coach or to be mentored by someone, or um, there are so many different other avenues to be able to take. So I do think career coaching is going to be very um but
Yeah.
don't be if industry is going to be getting involved too because of the huge gaps. One example is Home Depot, for example. In the US, they have gotten more involved in trade certifications and facilitating some of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's hard to completely predict, but you can kind of see the direction things are starting to go.
Yeah. And I think that I'll just be very honest. I know a lot of people with degrees who they can't do anything actually. They're like it didn't really prime them for anything because they knew all I need to do is show up and do the bare minimum and I get my degree at the end and that's it. So they didn't necessarily even build the skills of discipline and follow through and consistency and all those kind of things that I feel is the real purpose of going through university and stuff. Like to me, having gotten 3 degrees essentially during my time there, it's like, okay, this was really just a practice in being an adult where there's a lot of stuff you don't want to do and you still got to do it anyway. Right. And
Yes.
then, this is also about critical thinking. It's about having huge data sets and being able to draw connections and make those connections between it. Right. And so I find like a lot of folks, especially now, I can only imagine with the use of AI and things like that, like they're not even getting their own degree themselves. Right. Like I saw one thing where I think like 90 something percent of one of these classes all used AI for their final papers and they got failed. Right. Like they can't do anything. Right? Like we've actually walked ourselves into incompetency, I feel, in a lot of ways. Right. And so, to necessarily now expand things to, oh, well, let me see what else you do versus my criminology degree being enough for you to now sign a paper and say, yeah, I want to pay you this. Right. Like, why don't you actually see if maybe some of those things that I learned in my criminology degree, maybe now I use some of those skill sets to optimize my podcast, and now you see that I've actually used a skill and transferred that into real life. So that is more valuable, right? So to me, I could see myself, if I ever was in a position to hire again, I'd done that like long time ago, but I could imagine myself asking questions like that, right? Because anyone can go get an online certificate and call themselves a coach or I have this or I have that. It's like, well, prove it. Show me something tangible. Prove it. Right? Because a lot of people, they still abide by the fake it and make it thing. Right. And all we ended up doing is creating a huge workforce who's all just faking it.
It's true.
Yeah.
And and they're taking some of them are taking the laziest route, which is really even like some people are like, "Oh, kids nowadays." I'm thinking kids have always been hard. They will
Mm,
always be hard. That is their job, to be a pain in the tush. So
yeah.
they keep you on your toes. I feel like they keep me young because you have to be on point in your mind, and it's not like life is what you make of it too. You have to really like be diligent about pursuing what you want. And if you're finding a mentor, be diligent um about be diligent about doing your due diligence around
Exactly.
things.
Yeah.
And teaching young people, like you said, there's more value in teaching them how to have an effective online presence. Stop giving them a phone with no communication on how it should be used. And you can start at a young age. It doesn't have to be like have your young child do a podcast, have them write a paragraph, and have them do a podcast for their grandparents and immediate family. They don't have to be all over the internet. It's more about teaching them advanced skills before they're released into the world with and get them to think about how they write and what they write and what the purpose is behind what they're doing, and really peeling back the layers so that they are more creative in their deliveries, so they can show who they are and in a more transparent, healthy way. um, Even though, or more curated way, because social media, people talk about authenticity, but it's a little more curated.
Yeah, it's very ironic.
Yeah. But just teaching them how to go about it, and the purpose. It's really a big deal. It's kind of like the kids that go pro for they get the scholarships in sports.
Mhm.
And then they go off into a higher education to do said sports, but then they get into some trouble and they are all over the internet and yada yada. But the problem is they weren't trained um, on how, public image and how to put themselves out there, and
Mhm.
just the social creative elements that make us human.
Right.
um, and there's so much value in that. Like even writing an essay, yes, there's value in that, and you can teach foundational skills. But like, how many times you write 20-page essays like nowadays?
Yeah.
But the principles of reading and writing, yes.
Yeah.
You should be able to look at a work and understand, uh, basic principles of anything, really. Even if you're not going to, you should understand, like, I had one kid who's like, "I'm gonna make millions. I don't need to learn this stuff." I'm like, "Yes, you need to know contracts, at least the basic language. Yes, you hire a lawyer.
Yeah.
Yes, you hire a CPA and a um and whoever you need. However, you need to make sure they're not ripping you off. So
Yeah.
you need some foundational skills in certain areas to ensure that you come across as intelligent as you need to come across."
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And a theme that has also run through our conversation is really around the mental health of people, right? And I think that in our time alive, I think that the conversation has really expanded to include children. When we explore themes of anxiety and depression and disengagement and all of these things, right? So, I know we've harped on a little bit of what isn't being done, right, for these kids and how it's sort of fallen short. But I want to shift up the energy a little bit, right? I want our audience to maybe hear it from someone who has a tremendous amount of experience, right? Um, Being in the field, also being a mother, and all of the other things that you are, right? How is it that we can show up better to maybe support these kids and perhaps ourselves in navigating some of these challenges? Because they are the things that we're all impacted by, right? And oftentimes we don't necessarily have a course or something we go get certified in so that we understand these things on a deeper level. When, although we could make a great argument that these should almost be required learnings for life, right? So, how do we show up better so that we can actually start to turn things around? What's your take on that?
I think people need to see children as a complete blank canvas. Um, Everybody comes with the expectation that they have to come packaged and ready to know everything. And that's not the reality. Some kids don't know how to play and they need to be taught. Um, are they going to input those structures to be able to give them the supports? Not necessarily. But as a parent, from a parent's perspective, break down and communicate with them on a regular basis about what you're doing, why you're doing it, how it functions in the world. You expand their vocabulary, you expand on their knowledge of the world before they actually go out there.
Right.
And then once as they start to engage with the world, they're going to start seeing what you're talking about. So don't they are listening more than you realize.
Yeah.
I used to have teenagers. I would talk to their parents, something comes up, and I'd be like, "Oh yeah, your kid said this," and they're like, "They actually listened to me." I'm like, yes, they do. I'm like, you might be like the old shoe, but it's and they're always so appreciative of, giving this similar message that aligns with their value sets. But they just need those supports. They need things explained to them. They just don't understand the world, and we only understand the world based on our previous life experiences, and we know what we know, and we've experienced what we've experienced, and it's important for us to talk to each other if we are out of our element. Talk to each other if you have these questions like, what do I do around these struggles or that struggle? um, and some things are very a lot of people also talk about, this is an interesting one, immediate gratification in children. Uh, that's children. And that's a lot of adults. But just because that's their starting point, it doesn't mean that needs to be their end point. And just start stretching, like the marshmallow test. You just keep prolonging the gratification as they grow and mature. And then they'll start to understand like short term and long term goals. I've started doing that with my children, and I'm seeing leaps and bounds in a short amount of time. And we have things that appeal to their immediate gratification and the things that appeal to their long term gratification. And just starting to yeah, break down what your goals are for your children and what your children's goals are, and get them used to it. And then start dialoguing about what that needs to look like from both of your sides. What is your role in achieving those goals from both ends? Like, what do you need from me to achieve your goal? What do you need from yourself to achieve this goal? How can we support each other as a team? Because that's what we're supposed to be. And get the skills in place so that you can move forward, and you don't need to know everything, and you don't need to be everything. Um just my boys, I know that they'll need strong, like, they are very rowdy. And a lot of, if your kid's a dancer, what do they say? They say put your kid in dance school. My kids were rowdy, so I put them in Muay Thai.
There you
And they're doing so well because, you see where they're at, and they understand that we're trying to build our focus and our control over our bodies and minds. And they're exposed to all these, like, great, like, men and women that are focused and with their energy, and they're physically strong, and not only physically, but mentally. And they're starting to see how the pieces fall together, and in time, we will all be able to build the skills that we require. And even if you're building them as an adult, a lot of us are on new journeys that are very messy.
Yeah.
And even when we're met with failure, our kids are witnessing our reactions to everything. What happens when we're met with failure? We get back up, we try again. What happens and we all do, and we need to show ourselves grace. And I think they should be met with some grace as well. And yeah.
I think that's really important. Thank you for sharing that. And, one thing I want to ask you is, we often focus on what kids need to learn, right, in order to succeed. But I think one question that often doesn't get asked enough is what's one thing that parents of kids today can learn to really support them in actually thriving?
Um, well, like, getting to know them would be important. And then, like I said, filling those skill sets, but also allowing time to do nothing. I think the flip side, we're expected to entertain our kids 24/7. They have to always be doing something, an activity, and
Yeah.
doing this and doing that. And um, I think we need to slow down sometimes. I know I was talking to Suki about how where you guys are, like, you've had to get used to really slowing down in that living environment. Um, like, getting a tow truck might take a few days, and
Totally.
getting used to how things ebb and flow. And I think we're that generation that was in between, right? If you think about it, we used to get mail in 4 to 6 weeks. Now we get, like, I have we have thousands of messages
Right.
in our so things are not slow anymore. And I think we need to really just be unapologetic about just relaxing and taking time for ourselves and letting our kids know it's okay to like sit down, read a book,
Mm.
just spending, you don't have to do everything curated, beautiful, all these activities fill up every moment of your day. Um, chill out and chill together.
I love that. And, I think that's such an important message, especially for, families that might say identify themselves as immigrant families, right? Like I just think about my family, for example, and the idea of rest and like it's okay to do nothing, right? Oftentimes that would be something that might be communicated from the adult to the child, right? But to the child, I think what something that has been lost through the process of the adult themselves not embodying that permission to rest is that the child almost feels like they don't really have the permission to rest. It's almost like a test. Like, am I actually allowed to rest? Right? So I think it's so important, and I've had this conversation quite regularly throughout 2025, is that you almost need to allow the people in your ecosystem to see you rest. Like, allow them to come through the door and see you lying down on the couch. Allow them to see you sitting with your book in the corner and or whatever, or playing a game because you really enjoy it. We need to, I think like sometimes as adults, we almost go out of our way to show that we don't have fun or to hide that we have some fun, right? And so I think like if we make that bit of a shift where we actually allow the children around us to see a little bit more of who we actually are and a little bit more of what we do, right? That in itself will be a signal to them that, oh, it's okay. And it's all right for me to not have my calendar filled with 20 different extracurricular activities and, all of this, and I'm traveling here and I'm traveling there, right? Like I think that in itself will help us because we're in such a fast-paced world where everyone is showing their highlights all the time of their life that we almost feel compelled to use and squeeze everything we can out of every single second of every 24-hour window. I think that's so crucial. I think that in itself is going to do a lot for mental health and anxiety and all the other things that many of us are really bogged down by nowadays.
yeah, I think you're right. Slowing down is just, it's very key, which is hard to do. And I'm very go
Yeah.
myself, and I have to remind myself. And then just set goals for yourself until it becomes habit for those that are struggling with it. Um, and I would, and it's always the transition part. Like if I went to where you guys are, I might, I would definitely I would definitely need time to transition to that slow of a pace. But it's also very beautiful. And it's actually really interesting to see how we become hardwired that it would be hard to slow down, which is, it's not good for our anxiety, for our inner, our hearts, our minds, our relationships, our and even come together and do nothing together.
Yeah.
Um
How
literally
beautiful
it
those
bring
days are.
everybody bring your own food, or we're ordering, or this is like a low effort, no um, kind of muss, no fuss kind of get together with the kids. And I think the kids will need a lot less than we realize. My kids do well with boredom, actually. They just start building or start like they'll sit and read a book. And I'm very grateful for that. But I think we all need to and anybody can do it at any stage. And here we have libraries and that kind of thing. And we have even some little libraries on the corners. So there's always a way to kind of get access to the things you need. And um, even in budget friendly ways for those that are struggling.
Yeah. And I like what you said there, like sometimes essentially we do kind of overcomplicate things and think kids need more than they do. And, oftentimes when I see that happening and it's usually backed by some parents who are quite frantic and probably exhausted, is they're oftentimes trying to provide to that child what they wish they received when they were a child. So oftentimes they're not even meeting the child's need. And then they get frustrated when the child is maybe not feeling satisfied by whatever it is that they work so hard for, because that's not what they asked for anyway. Right. And so, I find like just listening, asking your kid, what is it that you want? Right. Like, what would make you happy versus just this imposition of what should make you happy. Right. And I think the gratitude will then build that much more. The appreciation, the bond be that stronger. Right. Because you're actually understanding. It's like understanding a love language, right? It's like, well, what's the use in communicating in my love language to you? Are you going to receive it, or do I need to understand your love language and what you need, right? So I understand how to communicate to you, right? So I feel like that is a big piece that's relatively low hanging fruit that can make a big difference in all of our environments, right? Whether kids are part of the equation or not, right? I think if we just tap into that and really try to understand, well, what am I trying to deliver, right? And what is this person wanting to receive? And is it being in the same language, or are these apples and oranges, right?
And I think we have to bring it back to just mutual respect. Um, like kids, especially in when you think in like human dynamics and how they function, it's like a lot of it when it comes to kids, it's always like a power, dominance, and control thing.
Mm.
Comply. I am the I will dominate you.
Yeah.
And it's not, it shouldn't be that way. I think we need to, I always, even from the worst of the worst kids, and when I come at it from a place of, mutual respect and natural consequences,
Yeah.
uh, those are two places that, you know, if you yell at me, I am naturally not going to do. Like, let's talk to each other with more respect. And but when they feel like when they know what it is to be in a healthy relationship with mutual respect, you also change the dynamic not only in the short term but also in the long term. And we're seeing a lot of these like power dynamics, old school parenting, new school parenting, let me get my belt versus like overly permissive parenting.
Yeah.
And there's that sweet spot in the middle where um that's, not abusive and not not permissive, and you're not a doormat either,
Yeah.
but there's that sweet spot where we can like grow to have the healthy relationships within those families where we want to be around each other, because even like generationally speaking, there's some consequences to people's choices on how they interact with each other and their mental health, and we should be moving past it and move away from abusive tendencies and towards a more healthy form of communication and interaction. And um, it's going to take time,
Agreed.
but I'm hopeful.
Yeah. And I think it's going to take time and a lot of things going right and all that. But I think it's a great first step is more of us just committing to doing it ourselves, right? Not doing it for the sake of little Jimmy to witness his mom and dad doing it. Like for the sake of you, right?
Yeah.
Because when we truly embody it, that's when it becomes a habit. It becomes something that's not performative, right? And then that's when it actually is something that you're not a hypocrite for trying to impart that on your child about, right? And they're more likely to buy in, I feel, right? When they see that, yeah, you actually do that. You're not just a do as I say, not as I do type parent, right? And I think that that's going to make a huge world of difference.
It's and even speaking to what the incredible work that you're doing, like mindful masculinity and the impact it needs to have, and like men have often historically been pressured to like subdue your feelings and just, to be a certain way. And it's really nice to see that, there's evolution happening in a really incredible way. And as a boy mom, I'm excited about the ripple down effect that it'll have on their lives and their future, because I think you're that middle kind of that healthy place in the middle where logic lives, between, being overly one way and overly another. There's that in between. And I think these radical extremist ideals that people have been, that have taken over the world are very, and we will always have good and bad in every group and culture and religion. And or like it will always exist to a certain degree. But if we can maximize on the good and minimize on the outer
Yeah,
realms, that would be the ideal in terms of outcome for all of us.
agreed. Well, Jeanette, I think that this has been a very valuable, high impact conversation. And I thank you for making the time to, share time and space with me and with our audience. I think that there's going to be a lot that they are enlightened about and perhaps reminded of, right? Maybe getting a chance to return themselves to sit in the seat of being a student again, right? And understanding what that experience was like, but also to be a student as a parent, right? Maybe when we stop learning, that's kind of when, growth stops, right? And I think that the times are definitely not calling for growth to stop. If anything, it's the exact opposite. So I thank you for all of your wisdom today. And to our audience, both of us would really love to know from you, what you loved, what you liked, and what you learned from this conversation. So please don't be shy. Get in the comments. Let us know. That really helps us to understand how to inform future conversations and perhaps different education opportunities that do exist for us to step into. And, Jeanette, before we do part today, I want to flip it over to you to just share with our audience about how they can connect with you, why they might want to connect with you, if there were any sort of upcoming events that you wanted to put them onto. This is your moment to do that. So by all means, take it away and use it as you please.
Oh, thank you. Yes, don't be afraid to DM, book a call, all of the things at Refound Education on our socials. And we are on 9 different social medias. So you will find us everywhere from Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. So LinkedIn, feel free to connect with us on the medium that works for you, as well as you can always shoot an email info@refounded.ca. And also refounded.ca, the website. You can also see all of our socials and connections and points of contact where you can book a call. And we'd be thrilled to, talk to you if you're a parent. Also, if you're an educator and, you're worried about what am I going to do next? This made me nervous. You want support in building something and building a new, please reach out, and it's free to do a discovery call, and then we can talk about what some of your options are. We're here to help.
And why don't
I want to I want the educators to sign up on the site. I want more of us to work together and act together to um, demand the resources that these families needed. And I encourage the families to encourage their education options to sign up as well and to share with other families. It's the sharing part. We are very much, we're connectors, we're connecting with the right people. We're new, I guess educators are new to the social media market, but um, working together we can actually expand our reach and really you know push past the noise, because there is a lot of noise. And working together, we can get past that and really put money where it counts. So I look forward to also communicate to those in power and let them know what your views are. The more people they know that are in favor of pushing these, new options, the more support we can garner. And, the movie, The Ants, if the ants realized their power, we could actually make anything work in our favor. Yes. Thank you, Josh. Bye.